Senior lecturer in strategy and sustainability at Stellenbosch Business School, Dr. Jako Volschenk, says it's time to stop waiting on government's fight for climate change. Volschenk says focus should be on how the behavioural changes of individuals can achieve the substantial reduction. Dr. Volschenk's remarks come as ahead of World Earth Day on April 22nd. He joins me now to chat more. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. As we prepare to observe World Earth Day, perhaps let's talk about the significance of the day and the sort of messaging the day encompasses.
Good morning, Wanpo. Thanks for having me. Yes, I mean, Earth Day is quite a significant day in the year. It's the year that we kind of think about where we are, take stock of where we are. And I think it's also significant that we have to make a time in the year where we actually reflect and say, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What's clearly showing is that waiting for governments to have unilateral agreements around what needs to happen, or multilateral for that matter, is not going to work. We've worked with the United Nations for 30 years. The UN has been telling governments that we need change, and that change hasn't come. And the argument is that we should be making this change from the bottom up and not from the top down. It's
been said that we, as a society, are heading for a mass distinction, which sounds rather dramatic. Is it really an exaggeration?
I don't believe so. I think, it would be easy to say we can wait. But I believe if we're going to wait longer, the bullet's already going to be hitting us by the time we say we need to turn around. If we look at the latest data by the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, it's the last report where they say they can still talk about the 1.5 degrees Celsius change in climates from pre-industrial times. So we are approaching 2 degrees, and once we've done that, we reach a tipping point where forests would start dying out, the permafrost in Russia would start melting. There are 9 different tipping points that we will have runaway climate change when that happens. And connected with that, we've also lost the majority of our biodiversity, both in mammals, in insects, etc. So I do not believe it's an exaggeration. In fact, we are in the mid of a mass extinction. I think we can potentially choose what we can do about it to see if we can save some species and ourselves, maybe.
So with households being responsible for a pretty massive chunk of the global greenhouse gas emissions, I believe it's around 72%, who exactly are some of the main culprits here?
Well, I think it's easy to say that developed countries, but even if you look at South Africa with our major inequality, it's the rich that has the biggest impact. It's us that eat meat in majority, or beef for that matter. It's us that travel by car, that travel by plane, that go on holidays that are very far away. And I'm not arguing that we shouldn't go on holidays. I think we should just consider better when it's worthwhile spending our carbon budgets. And currently, we have to make a cut of about 43% to our carbon budget globally to make that change. But if you see South Africa with our very high unemployment, with our very high inequality, it's really the rich that need to cut down on the way that we live and realize that the level of wealth and health that we're enjoying, we're going to be the last generation with that level of wealth and health. And if we don't make a change.
You speak about meat and, looking at the state of the economy and some of the beneficial input from the agriculture sector. How do we even begin to move away from that?
I think we can drive it from the demand side. I think there are so many vested interests. If you look at the lobby groups in the US or in other places for that matter, as soon as governments start indicating that they want to make a change, these lobby groups, big funding groups, big pharma, big companies that produce meat, oil, all of those things, would say, well, we will withdraw funding. So the way we need to make changes are at consumer level changes. And that's really where I argue that behavioral change or nudging theory can help us to make those changes. We can make small changes that nudges people into different behavior without compromising the quality of living, but certainly benefiting society and the environment as a whole.
Africa as a continent is the least emitter in comparison to the world. Are the rich nations doing enough?
I think we should all do things. It's like with voting. If only I withdraw my vote, it might not look like anything happens, or we might believe that my vote doesn't make a difference, but collectively our votes make a difference. So everyone, we cannot as a developing country say we don't have any responsibility. What is true is that for majority of South Africans, we should be talking about climate adaptation rather than climate mitigation. But if we think of changing diets, for instance, certainly the wealthier population in South Africa should be looking at changing the way we eat.
The wealthier, then what happens to the poorer?
I don't think the poor is responsible for the majority of the emissions that we see. So things like, if you look at the kind of diets that we have as a rich society, lots of beef, lots of meat, we travel a lot, that's not what the poor necessarily does. We have a lot more staples like maize, corn, etc., that those people use, or poorer people, poorer communities for that matter.
So, looking at the matter that we're dealing with at hand, the Minister of Electricity wants to revive coal plants. How does this now add to to what we're dealing with, the heavy load?
I think there's a sensible side that we have to admit that, keeping food on the table demands that we use coal right now. But we also have to say that this is not the solution. We have to look at medium-term, long-term different solutions. The way that Cape Town has moved by saying that households can install solar power on their roofs and pump back into the grid, allowing companies to install solar plants on their properties and don't have a limit on those. Those are the things that I think we can do creatively. But our energy use is not the majority of where our emissions are coming from. The meat consumption, beef in particular, if we can switch to more meat-free diets. And in that sense, we've already seen airlines, for instance, as a standard, most airlines today would say, no, not chicken and beef anymore, but now there would be a vegetarian dish. So that was an easy change to make, but it had a big and significant impact on the emissions of airlines. The same can be said for menus. Just by moving an item that's vegetarian from the vegetarian dishes to the main meal, doubles the number of times that it gets ordered. So these are small nudges with really big impacts that we can make. And we don't have to wait for governments to make these changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks for this discussion. Dr. Jako Volschenk there weighing in on some remarks ahead of World Earth Day being commemorated on April the 22nd.